cover Disney on this channel because I think it's a topic that's been done to death by basically everyone else. It's the one thing keeping clownfish TV relevant, right? Like, oh, did you know that Disney is bad? Like, really, really, how long did that take you to figure out, genius? So I'm not interested in like milking a dead horse, like just like milking a dead horse. Like I'm not interested in like milking a dead cow. Okay, like I don't think that's the direction I want to go in. However, I do think one of the things that really needs to die is the narrative that I see like being pushed by the establishment. I've seen Fox News talk about this. Iger stated this in an interview, like post immediately after the shareholders meeting. I've seen this thrown around a couple of times, and I do think it needs to be addressed because I don't think like anybody is really explaining this to normies. Like I know people like who know are aware that like it's a load of crap, but like I have like had people like in my personal life tell me that like, oh, they have a point with that. No, no, let's make that clear right now. If you don't know, you have no business. Like anyway. So the issue is the narrative is that woke does not have a clear definition. Everyone complains about woke stuff. Everyone complains about wokeness in the media, in the schools, in the government, but like a lot of its enablers, people like Bob Iger, Hollywood executives, the billionaire class, a lot of them like throw their hands up and try to say like, oh, woke is just a buzzword. It doesn't have a clear definition. These people don't know what they're talking about. Yada yada yada. Right? Wokeness is not a real thing. Right? Or they try to like try to tell you that like, oh, wokeness is in an organic byproduct of having like all these different people to come together and make something they want to create, right? The reality is that like wokeness is forced because wokeness is an establishment attempt at trying to push cultural Marxism into the mainstream, right? It is an attempt at like controlling the population. And the reason there's so much backlash over explaining this to the public and why Fox News doesn't address this and doesn't talk about it at all is because like they don't want you to understand that they are trying to manipulate you into believing things that aren't true. About wars we're in, about films and their themes, about what's good and bad, about like the relationship between men and women, like what you can get out of your life, the value of a community and like a religion and like, the reality of science, like biological science, like everything they're trying to push right now, woke stuff is rooted in like the Marxist ideology. But they do not want to address that by name because if they do, it becomes very apparent that McCarthy was right, that communists have taken over like all the upper echelons of our society, and um, people will begin to like understanding that terms like equality are not like do not have the positive connotations that they're purported to have by like that we're raised from birth to believe in. Like people will start to see through the nonsense if it's ever commonly understood. Now, if you're like, part of the intelligentsia, if you're like, an academic, if you like went to college, you're going to have this stuff shoved in your face anyway. But if you're not in the college sphere, if you're not in like, the middle class, like you're not being indoctrinated, right? It's like in 1984, right? Where you still have like you have the heavily controlled like higher classes, the middle classes, and then you have like the proletariat, the proles who aren't really indoctrinated, right? They're just doing what everyone else is doing because oh, they know more than I do, right? Which is the trap that I think a lot of like working class people are in, especially women, who just buy into this stuff like, oh yeah, homosexuality, that's completely normal. There's nothing wrong with it. I saw Brokeback Mountain growing up. That won an Oscar. So clearly there has to be some merit to it without like really understanding like why something like that is depraved and disgusting. People like Nick Rekieta watch American Beauty and see it as like a serious, examination of the failings of modern American life, right? The disappointment that having a traditional life will bring you. When in reality, it was made by homosexuals who wanted to demonize the nuclear American family, right? Again, this is why talking about woke stuff in media is not a completely pointless effort, right? Because a lot of people like love to make the cope that like, oh, it's just entertainment. Like, what harm will it bring you? It's manipulating people en masse, and it's not always obvious when that happens. I brought up Nick Rekieta. He is a really good example of what I mean, of someone who's been completely brainwashed by a movie, right? This guy has legit sacrificed his entire life trying to live out his Luster Cunningham lifestyle. Like he legit wants to become Kevin Spacey's character, right? Like that's how he views his life. That's how he feels his world. Like he doesn't have any real experiences. He doesn't have any real value. He doesn't have contribute. He doesn't make contributions to society. He doesn't understand that it's just a movie essentially because he watched it when he was very young and impressionable and thought like, oh, this movie speaks to me. It's really deep without really understanding like what the film was trying to do, right? Why it was lauded so much, why people pushed it so hard, why it's an objectively bad movie, right? Like he's never critically thought about those things at all. Like he simply let this film, this woke movie from the 90s. And again, that's another mistake a lot of people make is that like people think wokeness is a new thing. You can find movies from like the 70s and the 50s that are woke. Blazing Saddles is woke. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is woke. Like again, you have to like think about it in the context of when these films were made, right? And again, there has always been pushback to woke stuff. This is nothing new. People have been calling this stuff out since like it started getting like um since forever. But they've just become like so all encompassing. They've driven out all opposition to them that until just recently, like there's been no real challenge to their narrative at all. And it's kind of interesting seeing like the major shift we've had since Gamergate because I remember when Gamergate first happened, a lot of people were like calling themselves apolitical or like straight up leftist, right? Liberals, right? Like very few people in Gamergate identified with the right. But over the next decade, you have people like Melanie Mack who are coming out outright condemning like the LGBT community. That's becoming more and more mainstream. Like it's becoming more and more well known what these people are actually trying to do. And people like Bob Iger, people who have been like spending their entire lives, who have been like groomed from to do this for a young age, are like trying to damage control it. Like, oh, we don't know what woke means. No, you know exactly what it means, and you're upset that you will no longer be able to get away with it because Disney's going downhill. Like it's weird to think about like seeing this happen because we were assured by the black pillars that like too big to fail was absolutely not a real thing. Like Disney, the empire of American entertainment, the company that owns Marvel and Star Wars now is plummeting. Nobody goes to see their movies. Nobody cares about anything they do or say. And like, they make statements like this. This is the big takeaway that people have from it is that Disney executives are in denial that there's a big pushback against woke stuff. Like that is the current situation in the entertainment industry is that they are not interested in creating new, interesting, fun entertainment properties. They are interested in pushing a Marxist agenda.